He hadn't expected his experience bar to go up at all, but here he was leveling up. Jin-Woo's excitement supercharged his speed. Kag, Gas, Gras. With Jin-Woo's help, the battle was almost over. Jin-Woo stopped a short distance away, caught his breath, and stored his daggers in his inventory. He looked around casually, feeling pretty satisfied. Mission accomplished, and to top it all off, he'd even leveled up. Jin-Woo glanced down at his stats with a grin. Nearly 20 high-orc bodies were scattered around. Jin-Woo could have leveled up even more if he'd taken them all down, but no big deal. The hunters had paid a lot for the permit, so this was their turf. Jin-Woo was cool with that. He tucked himself away in a corner where luggage might be stored. Then the last high-orc let out a loud screech. It realized too late that the tables had turned. It was now surrounded by hunters. The beast's roar echoed through the cave. Jin-Woo turned off his invisibility power and watched as the high-orc collapsed to the ground. Vawum. The hunters were panting heavily. No matter where they looked, every single orc was gone. Did we win? Is it over? Wait. Before they could cheer about their victory, Kishun asked, "Anybody hurt? Any injuries? Was anyone seriously hurt?" Kihon asked, his voice sharp with urgency. The female healer met his gaze and shook her head quickly. In their group, healers were skilled enough to fix most wounds, as long as the person was still breathing. So when Kihon asked if anyone was hurt, he wasn't really asking about injuries. He was asking if they'd lost someone. There had been injuries, but no one died. After treating the wounded hunters, the strike squad erupted in cheers. "We won," someone shouted. "We did it," another hunter added. The group cheered even louder, grinning from ear to ear. Jin-Woo stood off to the side, arms crossed, and a small smile on his face as he watched the celebration. But honestly, were high orcs really that tough? To him, they didn't seem like a big deal. Then again, Jin-Woo had never been in a high-ranking dungeon before, so he couldn't fully understand why everyone was so excited. Jin-Woo had no idea that hunters who tackled A or B rank dungeons also considered how much mana was inside when choosing one. High orcs were already super tough, even for A rank dungeons, and defeating nearly 20 high orc warriors was almost unbelievable. Jin-Woo was like a secret star behind this amazing win, but he had no idea just how awesome it really was. He quietly celebrated the team's victory when something caught his attention. A female healer from their group was walking toward Ki-han with a worried look on her face. Her eyes said she had something important to tell him. Jin-Woo perked up, curious about what was going on. Ki-han?" the healer asked softly. "Yeah, Ki-han," replied. The healer hesitated for a moment before speaking. During the battle with those high orcs earlier, she went on to explain what she had seen, her voice careful and serious. Her story was wild. A high orc floating in midair had ripped off its own head, and then attacked and killed another orc. Her face was totally serious about it. Ki-hoon was so shocked he couldn't even speak. "I'm telling you, it's true." Jin-Woo could barely hold back his laughter as the healer's face turned bright red with insistence. The celebration didn't last much longer after that. One by one, the hunters closed in around Ki-hoon. "Captain, are we moving forward?" someone asked. "Isn't this too risky? High orcs showing up so close to the entrance. It feels off," another hunter muttered. "Maybe we should pull back for now," a third voice suggested. Ki-hoon frowned, his eyes fixed on the dark depths of the cave ahead. It wasn't an easy call to make. Jin-Woo could see why Ki-hoon was hesitating. In a guild that had 2 S-rank hunters, this might be Ki-hoon's only chance to lead a strike team. If he messed up now, it could be his last. To back down this early in such a big moment for Ki-hoon's career, plenty of players would be itching to keep going and clear the dungeon. But Ki-hoon wasn't just anyone. He was smart. He made his decision and spoke up. Jin-Woo shot him a sharp look, but Ki-hoon didn't back down. "We're pulling out for now," he said firmly. In a dungeon, the leader's call is final. No questions asked. Without another word, Ki-hoon stood by his choice, and the team followed his lead. Imagine this: you're part of an elite strike squad, where there's one unspoken rule: always follow your leader's commands. Back in the day during wars, refusing to obey orders could get you killed. Now imagine a place even more dangerous than a battlefield: a dungeon. The person leading your team can literally decide if you live or die. Luckily for his crew, Ki-hoon was that kind of leader who never let them down. The squad let out a collective sigh of relief. Phew. That was close. Kahyun chuckled and clapped the hunter on the back. Don't worry. I'm not crazy enough to go all in. The hunter laughed nervously, waving his shaky hands like a drama queen. Alright. Alright. Stop messing around. Let's move out. Jin-Woo slung his pack over his shoulders, and the team started heading back the way they came, following Kahyun's orders. Jin-Woo couldn't help but feel a pang of disappointment as he walked. He'd really wanted to push further in. But what could he do? He was just a guest here, and guests don't argue with the boss of the house. With a sigh, he accepted that this was as far as they were going today. The female healer strutted over to Jin-Woo, clearly annoyed. "Humps," she muttered under her breath, still peeved that Kahyun hadn't believed a word she'd said. "Come on. It's true," she said, pouting and looking up at Jin-Woo with hopeful eyes. "Earlier, that high Ursip didn't see anything," Jin-Woo said, holding back a laugh. They didn't get much farther before the group suddenly stopped. Ki-hun raised his hand and shouted, "Stop." His voice was filled with panic. The hunters, who had been trudging wearily along, froze. Even Jin-Woo, who'd been keeping watch at the back for any surprise orc attacks, stopped in his tracks. The murmurs among the group grew louder. "What's going on?" someone asked. "Is there something else?" Another voice added. "Why is this path blocked now?" "Wait. It was totally fine earlier." Jin-Woo pushed through the crowd, shoving his way to the front. He stretched out his hand, and then froze in surprise. "It's blocked." There was some kind of invisible wall stopping him. At first he thought it might be like those barriers in Instance, dungeons that separate them from the real world, but he quickly shook that idea off. "No. This feels different." Something about this barrier felt man-made, almost artificial. When Jin-Woo checked out the magical wall blocking their path, he realized the energy making it up came from some super smart monster. But why would someone or something set up a barrier to keep people inside instead of out? That didn't make sense at all. Just as Jin-Woo was scratching his head over this mystery, he suddenly froze, his eyes snapped toward the cave entrance, and his breath caught in his chest. It was like the universe had been waiting for that exact moment to drop a bombshell. From deep within the cave, a massive surge of magical energy rolled in like an unstoppable tidal wave. Jin-Woo's heart raced as he stared at the growing light. Is that the dungeon boss? The surge of magic energy was way stronger than what he'd felt outside the dungeon, or when he first stepped inside. Other hunters shivered, like they could feel the waves too. Jin-Woo got goosebumps as he watched their faces turn pale and thought, is there a boss hiding its presence? A wall appeared that wasn't there before, and now the boss was showing its teeth after setting up a barrier. It felt like a trap to lure them in, sending chills down his spine. Then, as expected, the sound of countless footsteps echoed from the dark cave, more than ever before. This version uses simpler language with shorter sentences and more relatable phrases to engage younger readers, while preserving the key details and suspense of the original text. The noise was getting louder and louder, but the hunters were getting quieter and quieter. Jin-Woo would have thought this situation was super interesting if it wasn't so serious. "Ki-hun," he whispered. But there was no reply. Everyone froze, completely silent. Jin-Woo's ears perked up as he focused hard. The quiet around him let him count the enemies by the sound of their footsteps. Thump, 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 thump. His super sharp hearing and high perception stat let him pick out each step clearly. 48, 49, 50, 51. There were 51 distinct footfalls in total. They sounded a lot like the high orc warriors they'd faced earlier. Jin-Woo glanced around at the others. The tension was obvious on everyone's faces. They'd figured out how many enemies were on the way. Last time, Jin-Woo and his team had barely beaten 22 high orc warriors. Now, a whopping 51 were coming, more than double. Things looked grim. "We don't stand a chance," someone muttered. The strike squad seemed doomed. But then Jin-Woo glanced at his shadow. It flickered oddly, as if it were alive and ready to act. He could almost hear the shadow soldiers roaring with excitement, eager for battle. Jin-Woo spun around. Tube. Ugh. Never mind. Their low growls filled the air. Dread. But it wasn't time yet. Jin-Woo took a deep breath to calm himself, his eyes fixed straight ahead. Then, they appeared. Treed. The high orcs stopped in their tracks, keeping a good distance from the humans. The high orc warriors, more than 50 of them, charged forward with a fierceness that felt almost too much to handle. This situation could only end one way, and it wasn't good. "This is crazy. How is this even happening?
Oh,
Off. The hunters groaned, their voices trembling. The orcs' overwhelming force pushed them back, but there was no escape. Something blocked them from behind. What were they supposed to do now? They had prepared for a fight, but when the moment arrived, no one dared to make the first move. Kyuhun bit his lip, waiting for the right moment to act. I mean, if only President Choi or Hunter Chow were here, he thought, frustration creeping in. An S-rank hunter could totally flip this tough situation around. If either of them were here, those high orcs wouldn't stand a chance. Why does stuff like this always happen when they're not around? He frowned, feeling the weight of the moment. Kahun was used to fighting with his team, but now, without them, he felt completely helpless. It hurt that they didn't have an S-rank hunter to help, but he couldn't let self-pity take over. He had to act fast. Staying and fighting would be a death sentence, but their escape was blocked, leaving no other choice. He remembered the day he decided to become a hunter, his first step into a dungeon, and the time he got badly hurt and passed out. Even then, he knew this moment might come. With a deep breath, Kahuna steeled himself to face whatever came next. He gripped his sword tightly and looked back at his team, who nodded ready for his command. Turning forward again, he positioned his shield under his chin and glared at the orcs, who seemed in no hurry to attack. It looked like he'd finally made up his mind. Jin-Woo too got into position, prepared for what was to come. Jin-Woo hid his right hand behind his back and held Barca's dagger tightly. He closed his eyes as the battle loomed closer. His heart wasn't racing anymore, just a steady thump thump thump. He loosened his muscles and slowed his breaths. Okay, he thought, opening his shining eyes. The hunters were so tense. They found it hard to swallow. Tiny drops of sweat glistened on their foreheads as the air grew thick with tension. Jin-Woo was trying hard not to get too excited. How much experience would this give him? A small grin tugged at his lips. Then one of the big orcs stepped forward, pushing the others aside. It glared at the hunters with fierce, wild eyes.
Bear?
This orc was way bigger than the rest, with sharp fangs jutting out of its mouth. Is this the leader? Jin-Woo squinted slightly, sizing it up. Wouldn't the battle be easier if he used it now? What was he supposed to do? Jin-Woo played with the handle of Barca's dagger as he thought about his choices. Then the high orc opened its mouth and roared, Karak Shina Wigdu, Araknaka. Its strong voice echoed, and its sharp eyes locked onto Ki-hoon, who was leading the strike squad. The hunters heard strange words, Karak Shina Wigdu, Araknaka. They exchanged startled glances. What was that? Is it trying to talk to us? One of them whispered. Suddenly, the orc's face twisted into weird shapes. Then, in a deep and spooky voice, it spoke. Humans. It was like someone else was using the orc's mouth to talk. The hunters looked at each other in shock, unsure of what would happen next. Hey there, humans. The orc's eyes had changed from clear to cloudy, like those of a rotting fish. Gasped. The hunters were stunned. An orc speaking their language. That was unheard of. Is this some kind of trick? They stood with their mouths wide open, shocked by what they were hearing. The high orc captain kept talking, his voice firm and steady. Whoa, are you kidding me? A magic beast wants to talk to us. That's some crazy stuff. Kai-hoon and the rest of the strike squad were totally confused. They had never heard of anything like this before. Kai-hoon, you're not actually thinking this thing is telling the truth, are you? Someone asked. Don't listen to it, another teammate said. It's probably a trick, whether it smashes us or not. Let's finish this right here, right now. But, hold on. If we can really talk to it, maybe Ki-hoon started to say. Dude, how many dungeons have you been in? Someone interrupted, shaking their head. This is nuts. I still don't get how magic beasts think. The hunters were already at odds with each other after just a short time. Ki-hoon stayed quiet for a moment before speaking up. Kargulgan, did you block the way out?
Yes, I am the head showman of the proud orcs.
Kargulgan's deep voice echoed slowly. You cannot break my magic. With human strength alone. Is there anything stronger than you in this dungeon? Someone asked boldly. Kargulgan laughed loudly, his voice booming in their ears. Who would dare challenge me? Most of the other hunters scowled or covered their ears, but Kahun stayed cool and nodded. He had figured out what was going on. Whoever was talking through this high orc had to be the boss of the dungeon. The boss was trying to trick the hunters into coming closer, because it couldn't leave its lair until something called a dungeon break happened. Cahoon wasn't totally sure why, but he knew it wasn't good. The leader of the orcs raised its axe and glared at Cahoon. When he didn't answer right away, choose, either you die by my soldiers' high hands, or you follow them. We'll go, Cahoon said quickly, which made everyone's eyebrows shoot up in surprise. Hun, are you serious? Someone asked. Cahoon, another hunter protested. But Cahoon ignored them and kept watching the orc closely. The orc's cloudy eyes suddenly cleared back to normal. Follow, Homan, it growled. They were acting like wild animals again. One let out a grunt. Hashi Turika, it growled. With that, the hostile high orc warriors started to retreat. Their leader stayed behind and gestured for Cahoon to follow. Let's go, Cahoon said. Taking the first step, the hunters hesitated but trailed after him slowly. Jin-Woo watched, confused. What is Cahoon thinking? There were definitely more high orcs inside the lair, including the boss. Jin-Woo realized their chances of winning this fight had gone down even more. He couldn't understand why Cahoon made this decision. Was he planning to negotiate with the boss? That seemed like a long shot. But wait, maybe this could actually work in Jin-Woo's favor. At first, Jin-Woo had thought this raid would be simple, just defeating a few low-level magic beasts. But now he had a chance to meet the boss, which made things way more exciting. He put his dagger away and quietly followed the group. After what felt like forever walking, Cahoon started slowing down until he was right next to Jin-Woo. In a hushed tone, Cahoon spoke up. Hunter sung. Jin-Woo's voice was steady, his eyes fixed straight ahead like he could see right through the walls. Beside him, Cahoon locked eyes with the towering high orc, a sly grin spreading across his face. As soon as we meet the boss, Cahoon said, his voice low but full of excitement, we'll launch an ambush. Whether it works or not, the boss won't be able to keep that magic barrier up blocking our escape. Genius. Right? Jin-Woo nodded silently, a flicker of agreement in his eyes. The plan was simple yet daring: sneak in, strike fast, and get out before anyone noticed. Cahoon's confidence was infectious, and for the first time, Jin-Woo felt a spark of hope. They might just pull this off. Magic was tricky business. For spellcasters, keeping a spell going meant staying focused, except for curses, which seemed to have a mind of their own. The more powerful the magic, the harder they had to concentrate. But here's the kicker. Even if they managed to take down the boss, or mess up its spell, they'd still be stuck in the lair, surrounded by those fierce high orc warriors. It wouldn't change the fact that escaping alive would be almost impossible for the strike squad. Cahoon could tell what the other person was thinking, so he gave a determined look, and gripped his sword tightly. While they're busy with us, he said quietly, you slip away. Once you're out of the dungeon, contact the main strike squad right away. By the time the S-rank hunters arrived, everything would already be over. Cahoon was ready to give his life if needed. Are you gonna fight beside the boss till the end? Jin-Woo asked, eyeing Cahoon. The squad leader's face was calm, but his eyes were steady and serious. Our job is to close the gate, Cahoon said firmly. We're not here to survive, that's why they pay us big money. This is what we're trained to do. But that's not the case for you. There's no need for you to die here. Please get out alive. Cahoon's voice was filled with determination. His words showed how serious he was about keeping Jin-Woo safe. Jin-Woo could tell there was no changing Cahoon's mind, so he just nodded in agreement. Then Hanian arrived at the gate. She yanked her cap way down, so low that almost nobody noticed it was her. She wandered around, trying to find the excavation team. A couple of hunters glanced over as she walked by, but they just thought she was one of the guild admins, and didn't pay her much mind. Then Hale spotted Yoon-suk in the distance. The whole excavation team was crowded around him. About the dump. Her heart went into overdrive. Hanan kept her distance as she scanned the faces around her. Where is he? Beaming, she searched for Jin-Woo. But there was no sign of him. A wave of disappointment washed over her. Did he quit the team? She decided to wait a little longer. Maybe he just stepped away for a few minutes. 3 more minutes passed, then 5. Before she knew it, 15 minutes had gone by, and Jin-Woo still hadn't shown up. With a deep sigh, Hanan turned and walked away. After taking a few steps, she ended up walking back. She pulled off her cap, took a deep breath, and headed towards Yoon-suk. Everyone on the excavation team stared at her. Luckily they didn't smell too bad, probably because their rank wasn't very high. Oh. Yoon-suk's eyes lit up as he recognized Haein, and he rushed over to meet her. "Hey Hunter chap, aren't you supposed to be off today?" Haein asked, giving Yoon-suk a quick wave and a smile before leaning in curiously. "Do you know if Jin-Woo Sung is around?" Yoon-suk's eyes widened in surprise. Sung. He went into the dungeon to fill in for someone. Chaeyoung looked puzzled. "A porter? What are you talking about?" "Are you telling me he actually went through the gate?" The foreman nodded like he couldn't believe it himself. "Yep, that's exactly what happened. An E-rank hunter had volunteered to carry luggage, and walked right into an A-rank dungeon. That was insane. Who would do something this crazy?" Haein remembered seeing him yesterday, standing in the boss's lair with a weapon in his hand. What was going through his head? It wasn't just her imagination after all, and that wasn't the only odd thing about it. At first she didn't think much of it, but when she really started thinking about it, something didn't add up. How could someone who'd been a hunter for 4 years get lost in a dungeon? I have to figure this out. Iris Haein needed answers. Why was Jin-Woo at the Hunters Guild? And what was he doing there? To find out, she knew she had no choice but to head into the dungeon herself. Asian was not only the vice president of the guild but also an S-rank hunter. Basically, she could do whatever she wanted, even if it meant charging into a dungeon during a raid. She nibbled on her thumbnail, her mind racing as she tried to decide what to do next. Finally, she made up her mind. I have to go inside the gate. Yoon-suk's eyes went wide in surprise. Hey, what's going on? Should I get the guild to help out? Oh, no need. This is personal. I've got some business with him. Oh. Okay. Haein turned toward the gate, but something felt off. She reached down and patted her hips. Oh, her sword wasn't there. She'd left it at home. It was supposed to be her day off. Who would have guessed she'd end up in a dungeon? Haein frowned slightly. She knew Ki-han and the others were good at what they did. But still going into a dungeon without a weapon didn't seem like the best idea. She turned to Yoon-suk. Is there anything else? She asked. Yoon-suk blinked innocently, like he had no idea what she was getting at. Do you happen to have a weapon I could borrow, sir? Pardon? Yoon-suk seemed confused for a second before calling out to a hunter walking by. Hey, Sukok. Can you grab me one of our tools? Got it. Suko zoomed off and quickly came back with a picks from the excavation team. Haein stared at it, unimpressed. Hey, do you have anything else? Haein asked. Yoon-suk tilted his head. Like what? A sword or a spear? Haein sighed softly. I was hoping for something like that. Yoon-suk shook his head. Sorry, we don't have any weapons here. Haein nodded and started walking toward the gate. Yoon-suk called after her, sounding worried. Hunter Cha, are you sure it's okay to go in without a weapon? Haein stopped for a moment, thinking about it. Then she quickly turned around and took the pickaxe from Yoon-suk. He chuckled, clearly amused by her change of mind. Good thinking, someone said. It's never wise to go in there empty-handed. Well then, as Haein stepped back, Yoon-suk didn't notice her bright red ears. The strike squad members looked determined as they walked quietly toward their fate. The female healer approached Jin-Woo and began searching through his gear. Jin-Woo turned his head to the side,